Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Dental Voice, the second season with Zyris. My name is Rolando Mia, and you're here with our next guest. So the purpose of Dental Voice is to hear directly from clinicians, just like people watching the show, people who are going to see this, and understand the experiences that they're having, get their perspective on what's going on during these times, and then more specifically, get some advice from them. When you look at what we're looking and talking about in the second season, we're talking about, how to separate reality, what's real and fact, from speculation and just total fiction. So today we have our guest is Dr. David Rice. He is a general dentist who does more in Elgin, has a practice and has been there for over 30 years. He is an instructor, a product advisor with the Coyce Institute, and he's also part of the AARD. So really excited to do that. How are you, Dr. Rice? How are you, Dr.
Great.
David?
Thank you, Rolando.
Awesome. So what I'd like to understand, if you would, please, is just give a little background into the experience that you're currently dealing with in, the fact that COVID is such a big issue and we're now back in and working again. So what's that like for you, and how is that going?
It's been a journey for sure. From shutting down the office to doing nothing to kind of just bunkering down and trying to figure out what to do because I was frozen for a while. I didn't know what to do. And I really have to hand it to John Coyce because he tapped me and he said, Dave, we need to figure this out. So help me to form a task team. And so the task force spent, there was a 3-hour webinar. So if you go on their website, you can actually view a lot of the recommendations of what they need to do. And then there's a whole series of PDFs that you can send out to your patients, or it's like the ADA, they came out with recommendations and things like that. So there were so many smart people part of that task force of what to do to make the office safe, because we got so much bad press. Yeah. Saying that we were in the 95th percentile and the hygienists were 99th percentile. And it freaked out my staff when I had my first staff meeting. The tone was incredibly disheartening for me, because it's a profession I love, and I love doing what I do, and it seemed like people were really scared and because they didn't know. And so, but your point is a good one. There's so much out there. How do you discern? How do you separate the wheat from the chaff? It's like, and that's always been the issue. But I think the issue is a little bit stronger now because the stakes are higher. We're dealing with a lot more money, I think, and I think we're dealing with life and death at point.
Right. So it's amazing, and I appreciate the candor. And you said you were, kind of frozen, terrified. How did you get unfrozen? And now you're back at work and you're treating patients. What was that process like?
Really, the process, it came, like I said, when John approached me and said, we're getting together a task force, and he asked me if I'd like to be on it, I jumped at the fact, or at just a chance to do it, because so many things were coming through. There's a chat line that I'm a part of, that there were so many people asking so many questions, and so I started to compile in a PowerPoint everything that seemed to be applicable, whether it was air handling or UV lights or antigen antibody testing or whatever it was. I tried to put it all into PowerPoint, and then I spent the day just researching it, trying to say, okay, what are we going to do about that? What are we going to do about this? And so, and then the task force had so many brilliant people on it, people that had knowledge in certain areas I have no knowledge of. And so I took an area that I like, and that's the dental product part. So that was easy for me to fall into, but there were so many other gifted people that collaborated on it. And so it actually was a fun project, because we were able to meet like once a week and just discuss what was going on. And so it helped to ground me.
Oh, that's so cool. And thank you for sharing that. It's interesting. You're right. It's There were so many people talking about so many different things. The biggest topic that came up was this whole issue of aerosols
Right.
and infection control. What did you discover with regard to that, and kind of what are your thoughts now that you're back in and now that you're working again around the whole concept of aerosols, infection control, the whole biohazard related to that?
Right. And that's so fascinating to me because to me, I think it's really two levels. They talk about the aerosols, but I think it goes beyond that. I think it goes beyond like these people that are emitting the disease. I mean, there are people that they call super emitters. So we don't know if it's because they're breathing through their mouth or through their nose or what, but there are certain people that actually produce more of the disease than others. And if you have
Huh.
somebody coming in that actually has the disease and they don't have a mask on, it puts you and your staff at risk because you don't even know it. And so to your point, the aerosols, I think, can be trapped fairly easily if you properly maintain your HVE. So, but then you're looking at, okay, how do you evaluate it? Well, take a 2-liter jug of water, open up all the ports in the room, and then suck it up and see if you can see if it can eliminate that 2 liters in 8 seconds. If it doesn't, you should look at cleaning out your canisters, doing some things that you can do to help bring that closer to 8 seconds. And if you can't, you may have to think about retooling the office with people on slabs and people that don't have room in their mechanical rooms. I mean, that's a big deal. It's almost like telling people they need a room that has like a negative pressure room. It's like to create that in dentistry after we've had these open designs and things like that, it's a nightmare. So, but the aerosols, so you have to figure out on the aerosols where you're going to attack it. Are you going to attack it right at the source? Are you going to attack it slightly away from the source? Are you going to let it get into the air and then try to attack it? So each one has its own thing. And so my favorite is to work with the vacuum pump. The reason I like the vacuum pump so much is because all the air that's exhausted from that is going to the roof. It's going outside. You do not have to condition it. Where you start to do these super vacuum cleaners that hang outside the mouth, then all of a sudden you have to either deal with HEPA filtration or you have to do with UV and HEPA filtration or some way to condition it. So, and then the question is, did you catch it? Did you catch the virus? And or now are you taking the virus and you're expelling it, which again, there hasn't been a lot of science on it, but you have to look at what they do know and they think that they have it. They think that they have it cleaned up. But so there's, with a negative pressure room, again, how do you create a negative pressure room without building one? And like those HVEs that go into the mouth, like the Isolite or any of the other 2 units like it, very similar, can help pull constantly the air out. Even the patient breathing helps to get rid of the viruses. So I'm not here to sell Isolite, but it's a great tool. I mean, so you have to think about something like that in order to do it. I personally have an assistant working with hygiene, so they're running 2 HVEs every time they do the EMS, which is it's a glycine unit that polishes teeth, or if they use the ultrasonic. So we have now a hygiene assistant, so we've changed that in a way to try to help it. And so I'm trying to get them to incorporate the Isolite in combination with 2 HVEs. The problem is that some patients, it creates so much coolness that it's just too sensitive for them. So this is a learning curve. I don't have the answers, but I know that we're trying different things.
So it sounds like, in the absence of definitive information or in the absence of direct guidance, what you're doing is you are actively experimenting with different things. I love the fact that you're so research based, and then you're basically collecting the information and then doing what makes sense. And that's what I got. Did I get that correct?
You're exactly right. I try to be research based. The problem is sometimes the research lags. I mean,
Yes.
we're ahead of the research now. By the time the research catches up to us, you have to kind of say what makes sense. So, if anything, you really have to start to learn how to think. Think creatively, think deductively, think intuitively, to try to come up with situations just make sense. I mean, if you put an HVE that's sucking out 9 millimeters of mercury and moving at a rate of 25 miles an hour, and you put that next to the tubes, and you put two of them, one on each side, you do not see spray on the glasses or things like that we were able to see before this whole COVID thing. I didn't even think about the patient, we ought to give him a towel at the end. Now we don't even have to give him a towel because there's no overspray. Or not no, but very, very little.
Yeah, that is awesome. So how you mentioned, that your team was definitely feeling apprehensive prior to coming back to work. What was the message that you shared with them with regard to that, and how did you kind of overcome that with them and reassure them?
I just told them I've been working nonstop trying to figure out how to make it safe for them. So I made a commitment that I wanted to try to make it safe. So, providing N95 masks that they could wear all day, or create things in the, some PCO units, photocatalytic oxidation units that go into the central system, and then individual units, and creating. We bought all new. A whole new dry vac HVE system and replumbed all that for the office. And still, even with that, one of my hygienists whose daughter is medically compromised quit. She said, I cannot imagine, because her daughter's a senior. She goes, if I bring this home, she goes, that could be the end. And so she's got over 20 years with me. And so it was hard. It was very hard to see her go, but I totally understand it. And at first, when I first asked her, she was one of the first to say, oh, it's not a big deal. But then as she started to read stuff and she started to have to actually see what she would have to go through, it became more and more difficult for her. So my heart went out to her, because your staff becomes like family. And so you have to say that, well, nothing about my dental practice is as important as your family. So you need to go home and take care of them.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing. Did you experience a similar perspective from your patients, as your patients started coming back into the office?
I haven't.
What's that experience like?
My patients, I've not had anything. Once in a while you get somebody, because we have, we take their temperature, they hem and haw about that. They can't come into the waiting room. They sit outside, they're hot, we take their temperature. So you have a second type of Welch Allen thermometer that goes sublingual, so then we can take a second type of temperature to make sure it's accurate, because you lose one patient for a 2-hour appointment because they have a high temperature. It's like, so you need to have different ways to take the temperature. And then you bring them back and you make them, wash their hands or hand sanitize their hands. And that was probably one of the biggest things. A couple patients kind of balked about that, but we're like, this is a protocol. If you want to be a patient here, you have to do what we're saying. So, and I mean, and that's the other thing. I mean, we learned how to make hydrochloric acid, which is HOCl, and you fog it and you can spray it. And so I really think chlorine is probably one of the best disinfectants. So there's been a lot of good that's come up around, about because of this. I think we've really upped our level of trying to be more more like a surgical suite. Right. And so our infection control, I think, has really upped its game, which is nice to see, because it helps in a lot of different areas. not only with COVID, but with hepatitis or tuberculosis or with anything.
It makes everybody and everything safer. So,
It does.
yeah. Have you run into any patients who are just, I mean, adamant that they don't want to follow the protocol or what it is that?
No, I've seen some videos about patients that have been pretty obstinate, but that's not my patient. That's not my patient base. My patient base is pretty compliant. They're appreciative that we're back into work because they understand that we're wearing the mask to protect them. But as soon as they take their mask off, all bets are off. They could just infect us like crazy. And so they appreciate us putting ourselves in harm's way, I think.
And it sounds like it's, first of all, it's great that you're not running into, I believe I've also seen some of those videos of some people who just really become demanding and belligerent around it. And it's being done for their benefit and for their safety because of that. It's interesting. We heard, and we spoke a little bit briefly around this whole idea that you do get to choose who you bring into your practice.
You do. You know, absolutely. It's like, so it's your choice. I mean, you can dismiss a patient. You just have to create a space for emergent care and give them 3 referrals, and they're on their way within a month. Tell them you have a month to find somebody else. It's been a pleasure knowing you. I'm sorry it didn't work out for you. And if you come in with a problem, I'm here for you. But emergencies are very rare in dentistry. I mean, true emergencies, we found that when we had to shut down and they gave us the definition of what a true emergency was. It's like we could hardly see anybody.
Now, from a practice perspective and from a starting back up, one of the things that a lot of the clinicians are talking about is the level of investment that's now needed in order to meet some of the safety protocols. What's your experience with that, and how is that going with you?
You know, when this first hit, my wife, she knows me, and she came in the office because I was looking at about a bunch of stuff, and she goes, "I don't want you to buy anything for a month." So, because I would buy everything, and not only do I buy everything, but it's like I buy 2 and 3 of everything to kind of try in different ways. And so it is, you have to put some money out there and try to see what works for you, because what would work for me is not going to work for somebody else. So you can provide certain things, even for my hygienists. I mean, I provide for them the isolates, and today I went in after speaking with you yesterday, and I said, listen, we have to make this a protocol, and you have to at least give it a try, because they're not used to doing it. Right. And if you're not used to something, you're going to fight it, because number one, it wasn't her idea, so it's coming from me. It's not like she came to me and said, hey, provide these for me. Now it's from me coming down to her. So it was upside down that way, which is a shame. I mean, she came to me with different things that she wanted me to buy, and I'm like, no, those do not make sense to me. So, and besides that, I can't get them for a year anyway.
So it looks like you have to make that investment, but right now it sounds like that you're discovering what is working and what is not. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, because even with fogging with the fogger at night, I mean, what does 20 micron particle size look like? How do you adjust your fogger to create that? And then it's like, how much time do you put into it, and how much solution do you need to do? And everything is a learning curve. So it's kind of a fun time in a way to try to discover this, but it can be frustrating because the one question I don't have an answer to yet is who's going to pay for this? Because right now I'm paying for everything.
Right.
And so because I want it to be safe. But at some point, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. I mean, the ADA, I think, has had talks that they're going to have a special code for the COVID thing, or they can put some kind of fee in for that. But for right now, nothing exists. So you're just doing it because you know it's the right thing to do.
And the sentiment and the message behind that, you are doing things because you feel and it's the right thing to do, and that's very reassuring for me as a patient, and I think that's important, and I love that. I especially like the context that because you don't know, you experiment, you use things. You can't figure things out without actually doing, right?
I'm such a kinesthetic person. I mean, I need to touch it, feel it, play with it. I mean, I was constantly breaking my dad's stuff when I was a kid, like because I was trying to figure out how it worked. And I broke so many things because I took it to the limit, past the elastic limit.
And now it's made you who you are, and it's why you've been in practice over 30 years, and it sounds like things are going well for you. So I'm very happy about that. Thank you for sharing that. That's kind of crazy. That's awesome. So I'm curious, and because you've mentioned it a couple of times, you use the isolite, or you hadn't before. Is that right?
I hadn't really used it before, but one of my friends, I think one of the best dentists in the country, is a friend of Dr. Hirsch, John Durango, and Durango swears by it, and he's never led me wrong. He uses it all the time because he doesn't have an assistant always. And so he just thinks the world of it. And when this whole thing came out, he says, Dave, you have to do it. And even my friend Scott Eisen he teaches out at UNC, they have it down there in North Carolina with all their students. And Scott is also, when I have questions about products, they're two of the first people that I go to, and they both are advocates of it. So, but I don't have a lot of personal experience with it, Rolando.
No, I just, but you made a decision, and I appreciate that. What other products have you made a decision like that on, just out of curiosity?
Well, we bought a new HVE system, which is, I'm a 1-doctor practice, and it's supposed to be an 8-doctor pump. So it's supposed to, it'll pull, so it's supposed to pull a lot of volume. But in hypochlorous acid is really another big thing. And we have different, and like I said, we have these hydroxyl units from Odorox that have gone into the HVAC system, and also standalone units. So you can decide, you want ultraviolet, upper UV light to kind of disinfect. I didn't go that way, but you have if the bug gets outside the mouth, now you have to somehow condition the air around you, and you have, are you going to use HEPA filtration, or are you going to use UV light, or are you going to use plasma? Because those are the 3 big players, and some of them combine UV plus HEPA. And so you have to decide, are you going to go with something like a surgically clean air unit? You're going to say something simple like with a rabbit, or, how far do you want to take it? And again, my emphasis has been on trying to capture it at the site. And so I put all the money, and I'm spending all my money to try to get 2 HVEs in to the site so that I have maximum velocity and maximum pull at the actual aerosol site. But what I said makes sense is the isolite is continuous, and it's creating a negative pressure unit, basically, right inside the mouth. So somebody who's expelling so just because I have my patients, and when I think about it, I'm doing it when I'm creating aerosol. So that does the first thing we talked about is the aerosol. I think I've got under control, but I don't have the part under control where these people are emitting it when they're sitting there waiting for a hygiene exam. Because really they should probably be wearing their masks, right, or they should be, while the finishing up and doing probings and stuff, they should have the isolite in. And as soon as they shut their mouth and ready to do something else, they should put a mask on. And I know that might be an extreme, but this is all new, so we don't know how much is too much and how much is not enough.
Wow, thank you for that. Wow. So if you were to, what's going to happen is there are going to be other clinicians who are going to be listening to this and they're going to be viewing it. What advice would you give based on the experience that you've had, based on the findings, based on the task force? What advice would you give other clinicians who are sitting there and, like you said, not sure, almost terrified or frozen on what to do? What advice would you give them with regard to how to move forward from this?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. It's like, for me, it's, find a great mentor, find a great group of mentors. I mean, for me, personally, it's Dr. Coyce, John Coyce, but Gord Christensen's he's a great mentor. He and Rolando produce a lot of good materials. The dental advisor, I mean, people who spend their life trying to figure out what works and what doesn't work, and who've been out there in the trenches. I mean, Molinari with dental advisors, and I mean, all those people, and so when they were speaking, I was listening to them. And then I had to ferret out for myself what made sense in my office and what didn't. So to be curious, so my advice would be never stop being curious. Just try things, get good mentors, and if several of your mentors kind of point to the same way, maybe it's something you should consider doing.
Yeah. So,
because the mentorship to me is huge, because like John Coyce says, none of us are smarter than none of us are smarter than all of us.
Right.
It's an old Japanese saying, I think.
That is awesome. Thank you for that. First of all, I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your perspective and being so candid about the things that you've done. What final words would you like to kind of give out to our audience, those listening here, patients or colleagues or your team? What would you like to tell them as we finish this up?
Well, what you told me when the first time you called me on the phone, you said, "What do you do every day?" And I said, "I'm curious." He said, "No, you do something every day." And it's like, do you remember what you told me?
Yes, I do.
What did you tell me?
What do you do every day? You solve
problems. Right. And so never stop solving problems. So that would be my advice. Never stop solving problems and never concentrate on the things you don't know, because that stops you. Because that's the other thing that stops me so many times. And even during our conversations, I would go off on that tangent, and you, as a good mentor, said, "Whoa, whoa, 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 whoa." You're concentrating on what you don't know. It's like, yes, but it's so easy to go down that rabbit trail. And so it's good to have somebody who can call you on things. And I think that's the problem with the world, is we build ourselves some kind of Gucci fortress where people can't give us advice of things that they might lose their head because they said the wrong thing to us. You know, we might cut their head off because we're so powerful. So always be open to advice.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for taking the time here. Thank you for sharing it. So happy. You know what? At some point later in the future, would you be open to joining us back and sharing what's happened since then? I don't know, months from now.
Sure, if you still want me.
Awesome. Well, first of all, Dr. David Rice, thank you for taking the time with us. Our viewers and those of you, if you have any questions for Dr. Rice, please send them to us. And what we'll do is we'll make sure we get to him so that we can answer that. Perfect. If you like the content of this, or if you please feel free to share it. If you have questions for us, please let us know. When you look at Dental Voice, again, this is the whole purpose of this, is try to separate reality from fiction. Dr. Rice, you've really helped us in doing that. I love the sentiment around experiment, and then do what makes sense to you. And I've taken that out. Thank you for doing that. Have a great evening. Really appreciate you joining us, and it's absolute pleasure to get to know you and for joining us. So.
And likewise, Rolando, you're doing a great thing for dentistry. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye.